with those who were undergoing this training program. So I traveled across South Asia, at that time in Nepal, India, and Sri Lanka. And when I started looking at it deeply, I realized that half of them were actually leaving the jobs after some time. So as far as our performance was concerned, we were great. We were doing 76% best amongst the players. But was it benefiting those who are supposed to benefit from this program? And I think that's where I also got the learning that we need to have open space for these people. So we created an idea called gossip circle. Now, gossip has a negative connotation generally. And, but we turned into positive, and we said, if we are talking of learning, one of the fundamental pedagogies of learning is that it takes place in a relaxed environment. And if you look at gossip, gossip never happens in a stressed environment. So we said we need to match these two together. And we picked up 7, 8 parameters of gossip, free format, discussion moves from one to the second to the third. There's no fixed venue of discussion. Topic of the discussion is decided by the participants of, and so on and so forth. And we merged these two together, and it did magic. Because that was the time when youth got a lot of space to express themselves. So they, they were free to pick up some topics. So they started from rape in their area to women's empowerment, to environment, to ecology, to sustainability, to everything. Everything under the sky they discussed. And they also talked about sports. Means they said we want to have our own games, competition, and so on. So we gave them that space to experience. And 2 years back, we did a survey. In all those places where we had this program, which was very strong, which is Gossip Circle program, which is open space program, the retention post-placement was much higher. And most importantly, in all those places where soft skill component or this open space was a strong component of our program, these youth moved up in the ladder within their own jobs. So first they got into the entry-level job, but from there they moved on their own without any support. And that happened only because they gathered confidence in themselves. And with our introduction, when we got introduced to Magic Bus and its program, means I knew Magic Bus for quite some time now, but in last 2 years we had much closer interactions. And we thought that sports is such a wonderful activity which can be more intensely introduced into our Gossip Circle program and so on. So that's where we are right now. But I'd like to say that sports and these open spaces, when they give a lot of other qualities to young people like leadership, teamwork, and so on, most important thing for me is that it gives confidence to them to deal with varied situations which they face in the life. And it is very important for those youth who particularly come from underprivileged background. So I'll stop here, and I'll request if we can play a small clip which will give a gist of what I said in different way.
I used to work for the World Bank, and the World Bank, like the government of India apparently, did not define sports as a productive activity, and including parents in my generation. But it turns out that when you do things in which people actually participate, in which they have an input, in which they have a sense of control and they decide what to do, that a lot of learning and shifts happen at a very deep level. And it is these shifts, or what would be called empowerment or self-confidence, that are actually the determinants of whether someone succeeds or someone fails in life, in making a livelihood, in increasing their income, in keeping their jobs. And so actually, sports is very serious business, as long as we don't make it serious. I think that's sort of the challenge. I think the second thing that I liked about your presentation is something that was emphasized very much in the morning, which is there's a lot of pressure now, and for good reasons, to focus on success. What is success? And what is impact? And what are good indicators of success? But I think there's a word of caution in your tale as well, is that it's very easy to jump at the wrong indicators of success. So a lot of training programs focus on really inputs, right? How many people are trained, or how many people are put into jobs. But if you don't focus on, was that training used, and was that training used effectively, you can make exactly the wrong conclusions about your programs. So I love the fact that you actually went in and, okay, it's 75% placement, but how many people actually stayed in jobs? And I think for the sports and development field, there's a lot of research done in the US in all kinds of programs, including welfare programs where you actually say, okay, now we've put people in jobs, but you go back 2 years later and you have 10% of people still in jobs. That's not a good indicator of success. So really think through what is a good indicator of success in your field, and then measure it both quantitatively and qualitatively. I think that's really important. The third thing that I want to emphasize from this, because it fits in so well into a lot of my own research and what I know of development, is that learning takes place at a deep level when people are not threatened. And I think that's really the value of sports, is that when sports is done in a non-competitive manner, that people over a period of time gain confidence in themselves and learn discipline. And it's that discipline and grit that comes in handy. It's it's a life skill. And research, again, in a whole bunch of fields, including neuroscience and brain research, shows that what distinguishes people from those who succeed and those who don't is grit. Grit and discipline are the two things that make a difference between a successful career or successful outcomes in school and college and in life and work. And I think sports is very well, the way I've heard it being talked about here, is very well suited in teaching those skills. So let's come back to the last question in this round, and then maybe before that, if anyone in the panel had questions for each other or comments on each other's presentations? No? Okay, so maybe we'll start with you and just go down this way in terms of one message that you'd like, or some thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience, because after the group, I don't have a watch. What is the time now?
Maybe I can start.
Okay, you want to start? Okay. Sorry, is that all right? Okay, what's the time?
It's where we're okay. 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So thank you. I think I think great hearing everyone. I don't have much to add in terms of my concluding remarks, but I think we heard things about the gossip stuff. You talked about it needs to be non-threatening, for example, and I totally believe in that. I think it needs to be fun, and that's where you would really get your learning, from. And I think just example that I just took off again this weekend playing golf, that itself was very non-threatening, fun, and very collaborative. And I can't find any platform that gives that better than sports. Fine. It doesn't matter what level it is, but it's great. And I think I'm also very, very encouraged, even though cricket is so important in India, but I'm encouraged at the youth of today I think because the youth of today is becoming very, very global, they are really turning into something like football a lot. In fact, at least if I look at just the friends of my son, I think they are more focused in football than even cricket. I think that's, again, a sign that it is not just about the city you live in, the country you live in. I think people are becoming really global citizens. So I look at sports as being very, very good. And I think we're finding more and more connects even in terms of even Accenture. I think there's something called Play Soccer in the US right now. So, someone from Accenture wrote to me because they probably saw this program today happening and said, hey, you know what, this is what I'm doing in Accenture, as part of Accenture in the US to do with Play Soccer, which is pretty encouraging. So,
Thank you very much. Let's go this way.
Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough. I know this whole time we're talking a lot about focusing on youth development, and obviously this whole week is using sport for good. And I guess I've got a few questions and a few comments. And one, if you're using sport, have you identified what you're trying to develop? And already on this panel, we've talked about leadership and keeping that leadership engaged, employability and economic viability, creating self-directed learners, this whole idea, especially in India, of this population blip. By the way, you're going to hear a lot of phrases from my colleagues that I'm going to use right now. Soccer coaches are the absolute best pirates in the world. If something works, we steal it. So if you hear your phrases, I took them definitely. There's a whole range of social issues out there that sport can address. And the other big thing and the big shift that's happening globally is not all education happens in the classroom. It's already been set up here that it takes place in a relaxed environment where everyone can have fun. And for me, that means the soccer pitch, the football field. And that's an incredible place where you can teach. One of the biggest misconceptions is that we don't just show up, bounce a ball, play a few games, pat a few heads, take a few pictures, and expect change to happen. There is a definite process behind it. Sports can provide the skill sets that can address all of the issues that we've been talking about and to focus on this youth development. So I guess the question I'd like to leave with you guys is, are people starting to use sport hoping for these skills to just appear, or do you have a process behind it? Have you thought it through about what you're trying to create? Are you using the field as a platform to educate, to create free thinkers, self-directed learners, problem solvers, which will be able to address and make the social change that we're all looking for?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to briefly mention the transformational impact that social enterprise has had on Kick for Life, largely due to the challenges of sustainable funding in our sector. We've developed a number of social businesses, including restaurants, a hotel, a corporate football league, that have all made us made Kick for Life a more financially secure and independent organisation. But inadvertently, we also found that they became a natural extension of our livelihood programming, providing wonderful opportunities for our participants to gain income, experience, traineeships, and links to sustainable economic independence. And something I'm a bit of a plug here for the livelihood workshop I'm looking to cover is the interconnectedness between social enterprises and livelihood programs, although I hear the other two workshops are also very good.
So actually an important message there is that to remain sustainable or to continue to exist financially, it's important to look at the organizational forms and the evolution from a football club to a social enterprise. I think it's a very nice shift in thinking about an organization and how to make it sustainable thinking creatively even about organizational forms is really important. Matthew?
Just one thought, only just to, with there's tremendous pressure in terms of ticking boxes, as you rightly said, in terms of vocation training and getting young people obviously into jobs. And really the message is to look at young people as human capital, actually look at the individual, give them the space and the framework. And that economic independence is only one indicator of success in life. And we need to recognize and have a broader recognition of success in terms of really enhancing young people's quality of life through other indices. So that's the message.
Thank you.
We are quite convinced that sports and, as I said, gossip circle, open spaces do have very significant impact on quality of programs, particularly when we talk about development of youth, employment, and so on. But we have still not been able to convince the governments. I have experience of governments in South Asia. We are still struggling to, whenever we go up with the proposal, which has this small component, which is around 10 to 12% of the total program, they say, don't waste money on this. And eventually they chop down that part of the budget. They say, we'll approve this part. And so because we are convinced, we put in money from our own sources, various other sources, to see that it has very strong and sustainable impact on youth and their life. Now, I think it is important for all of us to come together and in different ways we have to convince the governments, because whatever we say, but biggest investment on development comes from governments. And if investment doesn't change there, it won't bring any change. Means thousands of magic buses, thousands of élections, many NSDCs, many Accentures can't do what government can do in terms of investment of resources. So I think we need to have our eye on that, and we must work together to bring that kind of change.
Two things. One is in terms of, while I've been asked to talk about a takeaway that, or call to action that I could share, I think more important for me, I think the learning or sort of the going forward, my sort of endeavor would be to see how sports can be integrated in skill development and look at it as a larger goal of youth empowerment rather than just skilling youth. And that's a point taken. And as I was discussing with Ravi and Deepa, the way NSDC works best is that we try to co-create solutions. So if we can co-opt the state government, training organizations, institutions who are good at making behavioral changes, as Deepa said, and then maybe we could get magic happening. In terms of two things that I'd like to mention to you, in terms of what NSDC is doing in terms of the sports sector, one of our key roles is to create capacity within a sector. We did a skill gap survey, and there are a lot of opportunities going forward for different professionals in the sports sector. They range from coaches to physical education instructors to nutritionists, so on and so forth. And incidentally, I was in Bangalore last Saturday, and I was in conversation with this organization called Tenvik, which is promoted by Anil Kumble, and they have decided that they're going to set up a large-scale initiative to create a talent pool for the sports industry, which is an imperative, which is a pillar which needs to be looked at going forward. Secondly, we are also setting up something called the Sports Sector Skill Council. Sector Skill Councils are initiatives which are led by the different stakeholders in a particular sector, and their role is to identify the different occupations that are in demand and to create standards for each job role. This is also something which is in the anvil, and you all can make use of it once the standards have been drawn up and schemes like the STAR scheme, which is funded programs for training, are made available. Thank you.
Can I just one last comment? Can I just make a plug here? Because one of the really profound moments in my life was reading Dr. Deepa Narayan's book, which is called Moving Out of Poverty. And I just think it's really, I'm plugging it because it was one of the first books, I think, that created empirical evidence around how behavioral change can actually incentivize, can motivate one individual to move out of poverty, as I think the most important input, I think. So I just didn't want her to go without us recognizing that. And she hasn't asked me to say this, I promise you. And she hasn't got signed copies at the back. But it just is, I just think for people sitting in this room, it's a phenomenal book to get hold of.
Thank you, Matthew.
I just wanted to endorse. We all grew up reading
Yeah.
the books which were.
Yeah.
That ages me. Thank you. It's been a great panel. Let me just say a couple of things when I was asked to moderate this. As many of my panelists have said, when we were growing up, there was no sports. In a sense, the pressure was to find a job, and so I had to study hard. And I was a bit of a tomboy growing up. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I loved cricket. So I would play cricket in the streets and in front of the garage, and I could bowl overarm. My brothers taught me that and taught me not to be a sissy and, just throw the ball. But then when I hit puberty, I was stopped. I couldn't go out anymore. So I have one daughter, and when she was growing up, the research in the US came out, Carol Gilligan, but basically looked at gender differences. Not only how the differences between men and women in many different ways, how they talk, but one of the things that had a profound impact on my life and hence her life was that girls didn't get an opportunity to play in team sports. And because they didn't get an opportunity to play in team sports, they couldn't handle the rough and tumble of work in the sense of working in teams. And so when you couldn't deal with failure as well or put downs, and women would often collapse. Obviously not all women, etc. And I think team sports is really, really important to learn to give, to take, to be in the background, to be in the foreground, to take leadership when appropriate and be a follower when appropriate. So what we did is when Priya was growing up, we made sure she had an exposure and participated in team sports. And for her, it was softball and basketball. And so when I told her that I was coming to this conference, she said, make sure you tell them, she's now 30, she said, make sure you tell them that I gave you permission to say that her participation in softball was the most important thing in her life because it taught her leadership skills. It taught her how to be part of a team. It taught her how to fail and not collapse and stay in a sense of failure. And what I overheard her saying just 6 months ago is something I had never thought of till today, was in softball in the US, once you're on the field, it's different, but if you're not in the field, you lead cheers for your team. So she said the most important thing for me was to lead the cheers because it was the only time I could shout at the top of my voice that I could yell and not be scolded. And so it was a great out for a girl to be able to use her voice. And for women, opening their voice and speaking up is really, really important. So you never know what sports does, but for girls, so my message to you would be, don't forget the girls, particularly in South Asia, but I think all over the world. Girls need an equal opportunity. Even though we may not know how to do it, we'll never learn unless we try. So don't wait anymore, given the amount of violence, given the overpopulation, given the crowded planet, given the millions of unemployed men. We've got to deal with unemployment of men, but at the same time, we've got to deal with empowering women in very direct ways so that they don't keep quiet, they speak up, they yell and scream, and they have confidence to go into leadership roles. Thank you.